Welcome back, everybody. Yay, we're back. Okay, so it's Dr. G again, and I am here to introduce our next panel on identity and acceptance. So we're ready to get into it. It's called Identity and Acceptance. To learn who I am, I need to listen to who I am. And we have a really awesome panel. Yes, yes. Okay, we have Sarita Nauth, we have Vania Legall, and then Arissa Edwards. So I'm going to get into their bios so you can learn a little bit more about all three of our speakers. Our first speaker, Sarita Nauth, is an award winning social media strategist. She has worked in TV and fashion for several years and has painted her way across the beauty industry by creating looks for the everyday beauty lover. She is currently VH1 social media manager, where she develops and executes campaigns for reality TV shows like Love and Hip Hop, Black Ink Crew, and previously America's Next Top Model. Sarita also manages VH1's brands account, working on pop culture tentpole events like the MTV VMAs, movies and TV awards, Dear Mama, and many more, and manage networks like Paramount Network and Pop TV. Gosh, you're like the dream. All the great things you're talking about, I'm like, I want to be there with you. This is wonderful. So thank you, and welcome, Sarita. Okay, our next person is Vania Legall, and she is a proud 26-year-old Guyanese girl who was born and raised for 17 years in Georgetown, Guyana. She migrated to the United States in June of 2012 and has resided in Connecticut and now College Park, Maryland. Vanya accomplished her childhood dream of becoming a lawyer and was sworn into the Maryland bar on June 15, 2021. That's recent, so we got to bigger up. June 15, 2021. Yes, go. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Due to migrating at the age of 17 and then becoming an American citizen at the age of 23, she has dealt with dynamics of figuring out what is her identity: Guyanese American, and West Indian. Thank you, Vanya. And our next panelist is Arissa Edwards. She's one of our own from the Young Women's Leadership Academy. She is a graduating Guyanese Girl Rock participant who has also recently graduated from Thomas A. Edison CTE High School and will be attending St. John's University in the fall, where she intends to pursue biology. While she attended high school, she was on the yearbook committee in 2021, and she practiced running on the track team in 2019. Her favorite activities are reading, writing, drawing, and listening to music. So now we will start the panel. We will start the panel with some questions from our moderators. Let me actually talk about our moderators. We have questions being fielded from some of the students from YWLA. And we have Rihanna and Alicia, Ashley, and Raquel who will be asking the panel some questions. So we will start with Annalicia.
Hi. So my question is, some say that in order for us to accept others, we must accept ourselves. And so what do you struggle to accept in yourself? And my question is for Sarita.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Annalicia, for that question. And thank you, everyone. I'm so excited to be here, especially on the Saturday afternoon. I think that it's very interesting. I think that how with every single day that we go through life, we learn so much about ourselves, and everything that we come across in life, we learn so many different lessons. And actually funny, I was having this conversation with my mother just yesterday, and I'm 28 years old and I still find myself difficult even to this day, that there are many things that we tend to struggle with accepting within ourselves. And we kind of have to look at it in two ways: what people think of you and what you think of yourself. And oftentimes what people think of you affects what and how you think about yourself. And I think that it's one of those things that you know in your heart how you are as a person, And it doesn't hurt to listen to people sometimes when it comes to feedback about yourself. And that is something that I do struggle with in this world, in this generation that we live in. We're so often molded and forced to by social media to be perfect, to be all these things that we think that everyone else have, and to covet what other people have, and think that it's so easy to be those things, right? Changing our appearance or feeling like, we have to give into societal pressures. But you know in your heart who you are as a person. And when someone tells you something, it's up to you to whether or not to take it and to apply it to yourself and do it in a way that makes you happy at the end of the day. And I think that it's very easy to judge ourselves every single day and struggle with these things, but you don't fix yourself overnight. Some people may never fix themselves in the way that they might think their families or whoever around them judge them. But I think that how, as a lot of times judgment from others, it's very easy to succumb to because sometimes other people aren't happy. I'm going to give the ladies some time if Vania or Arissa want to chime in. Go ahead.
I'll chime in. Definitely, I didn't get social media until I was 17, which was last year. I turned 17 last year, and kind of using it now, I think that kind of saved me. And know that there are a lot of girls younger than me going through this phase of like hating themselves because they want to kind of be what they see online, especially those who are in school. They're seeing all of these people with all of this money and all of these nice houses and all of these really big accomplishments, and they feel like they might not be able to do that. They're not on the right track to doing that. And personally, when you're 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, I wish that somebody told me this. You have time. Some of these people do not get there are a lot of people in the generation before me. I'm Gen Z. There are a lot of millennials who didn't have their first house until they were like 30. You do not need to have a house straight out of college, especially not in New York. The property, value has like gone up. It's skyrocketed in the past 10 years. I feel like a lot of people see you just can't help but compare yourself to all of these other people. And I really want people to understand, no matter how old you are in this summit, that comparing yourself to somebody who has done different things and gotten different opportunities than you it doesn't make sense. The best thing you can do is keep track of your own accomplishments and what you want to accomplish rather than what somebody else has accomplished. And it's important to understand that.
It's what they say, comparison is a thief of joy.
Definitely, yeah. Just to jump in on the question, I think, Sarita, you kind of started off by saying this, that there's different things that we all struggle with in different aspects of our lives. So the one thing I'll focus on that I'm learning more and more to accept every day is that being soft-spoken is not an indication of weakness. Throughout my life, there are times, I was in the debating team in high school and did elocution and all those different things. And I went to law school, and I'm an attorney now for like 11 days. But a lot of times people associate like a strong woman or a leader as someone that's like strong in voice or loud, or in some cases aggressive. But I'm learning to accept that I don't need to change the level of my voice to be heard. Sometimes being silent or being quiet and only speaking when necessary or speaking when it's effective is just as strong. And so I'm learning to accept that in myself, because until I accept that, then people can't accept me in that way.
And my second question is, what gender pronoun do you identify with, and why do you think gender pronouns are important?
Yeah, I can chime in there. So my gender pronoun is she, her. And I think that's really important that people understand and know what your pronouns are, because it's how you identify as a person. Your identity is who you are. And some people, it might take some time for them to figure out what it is, but it is very, very important that people are cognizant of what they are and if they're not misgendering you. And I've done a lot of work with LGBTQIA plus teens when I was in a very developmental stage, like right between high school and college, with an organization called Scenarios USA. And it was there, like at this very developmental period of my life, that I learned a lot more about pronouns and people who were different than me. And while I went to school in Manhattan and went to school in the city, there were so many people that who I was friends with or knew whose pronouns aren't the same as when they started off with. And it's the same way that if someone works really, really hard to go through medical school or a law school, perhaps, but like it's important that when they become a doctor, you refer to them as doctor. You know, they become a CPA, it's all these different things. And it's a way of just letting them know that you're aware of who and what they are. And I think that's important because in our community, I often see that a lot of our brown community does not or has not been accepting, especially the generation before us, has not been acceptant of these changes that they see with their young people and even their family members or young kids around them. And they just think that, oh, well, that's not for our people, that's not for us. And it's not the case by any means necessary. If someone identifies differently, may they be they, them, or he, him, or, you know, however they choose to identify, I think that it's important that we're aware of how we speak to other people, because by misgendering someone, you could really do some damage to their mental health, because you're making them feel as if, one, you're making them feel like they're not making them feel insecure and not confident with the person that they're putting out there in the world. And if they're not hurting anyone, then it doesn't hurt for you to adapt and learn in this ever-changing world and society, because it doesn't matter what this person identifies themselves as. Are they a good person? Are they someone who have good intentions? And if their identity is something that you might not understand, or your parents or your family members might not understand, it's not their business or concern. So I will say that's very, very important that we're respectful of people's pronouns and how they choose to identify themselves, because it's who they are.
I would like to add on. So I've been addressed as she, her all my life. To be honest, I've never inquired to myself whether there would be anything different. So I'm fine with she, her for now. The reason why this is important is because I went to high school with the majority of people who are Black and brown. And, you know, I wasn't expecting that they weren't going to talk about it. And they did talk about it. They set up events, basically initiatives where, you know, our guidance counselors would go around at lunch, they would hand out stickers, they would encourage people to talk about it or whatever they were comfortable with. To add on to what Sarita said, it is a very big issue, you know, like I know sometimes we laugh and we joke about it, but there are a lot of people who've been, you know, ostracized by their family, made an example of. I think like just this, I think earlier this week, there was a video that went viral of, you know, a little Black boy who had the word gay shaved into his head, and he was being beat up by his family members, and they put it online. And, you know, there are a lot of people defending the older people in that video, saying that, oh, that's just their beliefs, that's just this and that. And you're entitled to your beliefs, but your beliefs don't entitle you to hurt other people. I hope that that's understood. And there are a lot of, you know, Black and brown people who are saying, hey, something similar happened to me. I was put in a situation where people did that to me, where such and such family member didn't want to hang out with me anymore, where my friends didn't want to hang out with me anymore. It's important to make other people feel comfortable. And I think that most of all, when you're faced with something new, it's more important to learn than to be right. I feel like that's very important. A lot of people will go, oh, well, that's wrong. I think that's wrong. Yeah, well, that's not the point here. You can determine whether it's wrong after you learn about it. You can't just, and you know, sometimes it's it's something that's wired into our brain. You think like immediately after you're faced with something, you're like, oh, that doesn't sound right. Like, I don't know about that. But it's important to learn first.
Sarita and Arissa, you guys kind of like covered everything. But to answer the question, I identify as she or her. And even in, preparing for today, I realized that I have the power to make that decision for myself. And that in itself is something that each person should have the right to do. And it's horrible that I have to say that, or anybody has to like make that point. It should be obvious. But I think a lot of it is first because people aren't accepting of themselves in like the different facets of their lives. It's hard for them to understand. Like you said, Arissa, to understand. Like really the big issue is a lack of understanding or the unwillingness to stop and hear the other person and to listen to the other person, and to even if you don't agree, at least try to understand, so even in answering this question, it just seems like a simple question, but to have the right or the power to make that decision, for me, everybody should have that right.
Lastly, my final question is, are there any judgments or stereotypes that you've encountered in relating with other people?
That's a very interesting question. Listen, there's always going to be someone that's going to judge you. There's always going to be someone that's going to find something wrong with you. There's always going to be someone who doesn't believe that what you're doing is on the path that it should be in. I was told that I shouldn't go to college because I was illegal at the time and I didn't have papers. I was told to wait a year. I was told to do all these things that I didn't think that was my path. And I often feel like in that process, and even in high school, because I grew up with immigrant parents, I grew up in this very strict household. It was very interesting because I grew up with this sort of like, and a lot of like young brown girls, I feel like I hear the story very often, that we're constantly having to strive to be better. We are in a different, we're women, we're of color, a lot of the industries that we're in are male dominated, especially in science or even in the media industry is pretty male dominated as well. And it's become very female dominated recently, which is great. But I find it that I've been told in the past, especially in high school and in middle school, that I came off as very pretentious. And as the years gone on, and I'm very confident with myself to admit that now, because it's something that used to scare me, because I'm like, wait, does my accomplishments come off as cocky or arrogant to some people? And that's often why a lot of women of color are very quiet when it comes to sharing their accomplishments, and should be louder about their accomplishments and shouldn't go under the radar, because I found it sort of like a silencing thing, like, oh, you didn't really want to hear about my story. You just assumed that I had so much to share. And it's one of those things where it's like, as you get older, you start to realize that my sharing my accomplishments should not be of any bother to anyone else. It should not be a bother to, it should not reflect in my character, that I'm not good enough and I shouldn't have to share. And I think that it's very easy. And again, my mom taught me the story yesterday, like it's very easy for us to judge people. It's very easy to do that. And I found it even as like I progressed even to work, my career trajectory, I've moved up very, very fast as a young professional. Right now, I am a senior social media manager at VH1 and work very hard for that title. And so many people I find have came towards me and been envious of what I've had. And I'm like, why are you envious? You don't know my story. You don't know what I've gone through. And I've always felt like this is such a safe space with the Guyanese Girls Rock Foundation that I've opened up, that I'm a DACA recipient, that so many of my colleagues who said, oh, well, like you got a promotion before me or whatnot. And, and I'm trying to be humble about it, because in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I don't want to come off as pretentious. And they don't know that sometimes what other people have, they don't realize is the thing that you want the most. And they might think that just because you're very accomplished that you, you have everything in the world. And to Arissa's earlier point about like rushing and like wanting a home straight out of like high school or college because we see everyone do it on TikTok or on Instagram. I bought my first house at 25, but it wasn't my thing that I wanted to do. I didn't think that's what I wanted to do. I was in a situation where I had to, and I don't regret it. But but I never have flaunted it because of that whole thing in the back of my mind. That's the reason why bullying sucks. Bullying other people because you are having a bad day really does stick and hurt people. And those things can, wound them, but those scars and the wounds may heal, but the scars are there for a long time. So it's very important. Sometimes if you have a problem with someone, and like moms always say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So, and I'm sure there's a Guyanese mom version of it, but I left Guyana when I was 3, so I don't have a great accent in saying it. So maybe someone else might.
I think that that's a stereotype that I went through in school. There's like so many things that I can think of, but I'm trying to think of something that. When I started high school, I'm a very like non-confrontational person, a very shy person. I went in second period. I started my in my school. You can either start at first or second period. I started second period, and I went straight to the back of the classroom. I've had people tell me like later on, like, "Oh, I thought you were so mean. You just look very aggressive. You just look like, you wanted to fight everyone there." And I was like, I don't do those things. I'm not a confrontational person. And then comes, "Oh, you were smarter than I thought you would be." High school didn't have a lot of Black people in it. We weren't the majority. So I would just kind of smile and be like, "Oh, really?" Like, because you don't know, you don't know what to say to people when they say that. You kind of just stare at them in their face and kind of like hope that they'll get the feeling that they're saying something that's like shouldn't be said. And you just, like, the way that I dealt with it, I think that I would just, don't judge a book by its cover. The way that I dealt with it, I kind of just went on my day. I think that I tried to do the best that I could. Even when I was like getting questions wrong, it's better to get a question wrong than to sit and suffer in silence. And you never know, like the question you had, maybe someone was too afraid to ask. But I really wish that I did confront some of these people on what they were saying about me and sort of the stereotypes that they were pushing about me. Maybe that it wouldn't happen as often. So I guess that's my advice for that. Set boundaries with people, let them know that what they're doing is uncomfortable to you. Let them know what is and isn't comfortable. Because at the end of the day, when they're talking to you and they want to keep talking to you, they have to respect you. Especially when all you've done is respect them.
Arissa, you're really wise beyond your years. To respond to the question, I think there's so many things I could touch on, but I'll focus on 2. First, being Guyanese in the US, but in states that have like really, really small Guyanese population. So I spent most of my time here in Connecticut, and then now I'm in Maryland. So it's very different to New York, where it is a large Guyanese population. And so when I say I'm from Guyana, first I have to explain, no, I'm not from Africa. Then when I say South America, no, I don't speak Spanish. And then when somebody just hears my accent, like earlier back in the, years ago, the first thing they'll say is like, "Oh, you're Jamaican." And I have no problem with Jamaicans. I have so many Jamaican family friends, but I am not Jamaican. So now, like when I introduce myself, I say I'm from Guyana, South America, the only English speaking country in South America. Like I just got to roll it all off before the questions come. And I kind of say it as a joke, but when I really think about it, it's annoying, but it also, I had to deal with, like, at first, do I combat what they're saying, or do I just kind of fit in and just say, oh yeah, fine, I'm Jamaican, or yeah, I'm just West Indian, and just kind of like pass it off. And so that, like, just figuring out what my identity is as a Guyanese immigrant, especially when most of my life, at least up to this point, I spent in Guyana. There's a lot of things about the American culture that I still am learning. I'm still grasping, because even after I migrated, like, you know, I lived with my Guyanese parents and family, so I know more about the Guyanese culture than the US culture. Like, I've been told by classmates or like friends, you know, Black friends, like, oh, well, we got to revoke your Black card because you don't know X, Y, or Z. And it's like, well, I never received it because, you know, I'm not from here. So just like now I feel like I'm getting more and more confident in explaining the dynamics of my identity, but it has been a struggle, you know? Even in just, I have no problem saying I'm African American, but even that term has a lot of nuances, you know? And then the second thing is being a Black woman in the legal space. I don't know if you guys know, but like 2% of the attorneys in the US are Black women. 5% of attorneys are Black. And so going into my first law school class with like 75 of us, there was 2 Black people, me and this other guy. And if one of us were missing, we'll text the other person like, yo, wait, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you not here? You dead? Like, what's going on? Like, we need the solidarity. And, you know, it's like, you could say, well, just get used to it. It's just a class. It's just whatever. But that feeling of loneliness, it honestly does affect a person. And so being able to embrace that, and that was school. And now being in the, like being in a space, like now I'm doing a clerkship, and it's like constantly having to deal with like sitting in a courtroom as a law clerk and somebody approaching me and saying like, are you the probation officer? And there's nothing wrong with being a probation officer. Like, they do amazing work, but no, I'm not. Like, why was I your first guest? Like, why didn't you assume I was opposing counsel? You know? Or people seeing that I changed the signature of my, what do you call it, like my email at work, and then asking me, oh, so you passed the LSAT? Which is like the entrance exam into law school. And they've been in like working in legal space for like over 40 something years. Like, you know exactly what I passed. So just like the small microaggressions, and just dealing with that. Yeah.
I have some questions. Okay, so my first question is, how do those judgments or stereotypes affect how you fit into society?
I think we just answered that one, did we? Or no, we didn't? Okay.
No.
Okay.
They're kind of connected.
Yeah, they're pretty much connected. And I think that how Vania, you had a great point, you know, as far as like how it affects how you fit into society, because you're not seen as someone who is of a stature. Never mind, you put in the hours, you put in the hard work. And that tends to happen to women of color often. And even in professional spaces, like I have been in the media and television industry for about 8 years. And I often find it very funny. I remember my first like celebrity encounters with work professionally. I've had very mean publicists come up to me and they're like, are you an intern? Why are you here doing this, this, and that? And I'm just like, I'm sorry, I am the representation of this entire team here. And luckily, you know, I've been at the same company for quite some time, but oftentimes you feel like you have to carry yourself with confidence, because if you don't, people will walk all over you and assume that you are of a lesser position when you put in the time, you put in the hours, and you put in everything for that to happen. And I remember one of those things, it's like, it's one of those situations where you want nothing more than that Guyanese accent to come out and correct somebody and let them know that, no, I'm not. I'm actually your boss, and I'm the person who runs this entire campaign. I've had these situations as well with working with agencies for pretty big shows. And when you go to these sets and people don't know who you are, you really don't get a megaphone when you enter a studio that says announcing this is XYZ person. So when your entire job is solely being on your phone, you get a lot of prejudice for that too, because people are thinking, well, you're just on social media, you're just bragging that you're here. I'm like, I'm doing my job. And if I didn't do my job well, that means that your entire show would never be promoted. So you have to be nice to me. And it's one of those things, and especially in media, but as I got older, I know that it's in every industry. You don't know who you are talking to. Unless you do your research, you might do the research on, say, the bigger celebrities in the room or whatnot, and definitely for media and entertainment. Oftentimes, many people do the research on the biggest players in the room, but those biggest players aren't the ones who are the biggest players. They're not the ones who are actually moving and shaking things behind the scenes. It's the publicist, it's the marketing manager, it's the person who's running the event. Those are the people that you have to, if you want to, kiss their rear. But honestly, I always find it just be nice to everyone. You know, I remember going into productions and shoots and whatnot. I'm nice to everybody, down to the person who's catering, to the person that's lighting, the person that's doing this, the person that's doing that, the PAs. You know, it's super important that you treat everyone with kindness. You know, even if you're not in a great mood that day, you have to be. And I'm sure, you know, Vania, you probably have had many days where you're just like, I'm stressed out, I'm worried, I'm overworked, but I have to put on a brave face because somebody's life depends on it, someone's livelihood depends on it, and this is not the time for someone to misjudge you and call you out of your name. That's the reason why people's name and their pronunciations are very important. The way people spell their names are very important. This happens all the time. My sister is also a brown woman in the investigation, you know, sort of agency industry, and many times, you know, she's Kavita, I'm Sarita, and we find ourselves getting like, are people spelling our names wrong, people saying our names wrong, people not even taking the time to say your name and say, is that how I say it? It doesn't take that long. And I feel like when people look at you and they just assume these things about you, it kind of puts you in an awkward situation, because it's like you're taking your own predisposed judgments and you're putting it on to other people and you're assuming these things about them. So I feel like you know, all the ladies did such a good job in answering this. You know, it's how you treat people is how you really, like, what's the expression? Treat people how you want to be treated. Yeah, it's exactly that. You know, because if you don't treat people with kindness and you go into situations where you judge them and whatnot, you just never know. And I've had many situations where those people are like, oh, I did not know that you were the boss, the leader, the this, the that, running this entire thing, and they come back and then they try to kiss up to you. It's the same thing in school. Don't do that. Don't judge or bully the person who's quiet and who's, you know, I often find a lot of like brown girls. I went to Susan B. Anthony in Queens, and so many girls, brown girls, Guyanese girls, were very, very quiet. And even after years, I've gone and spoken to the graduating class for career days and whatnot, I often find there's just always like very, very quiet young Guyanese women. And I'm like, who's telling these young women that they have to be quiet? Who's telling them that they have to be quiet? Like, whoever said the quietest wheel gets the cheese or something like that? No, like the squeakiest wheel gets, what's the express? See, I don't know the expression for that. The squeakiest wheel gets the grease. It's got to be the grease. It's got to be, because I don't know how cheese correlates with wheel. So, and because I can't hear all of you, so I'm speaking in silence. So yes, so be loud, be proud of who you are, and don't let anyone tell you who you are not, you know, because they don't know who you are and they're going to learn one day.
Arissa, if you don't mind me just jumping in here. So one thing I'll say, Sarita, you're saying you're not sure why Guyanese girls are usually like quiet. Growing up in Guyana, especially in high school, I went to a really strict high school. I won't call names, but we were constantly told, women, you speak when you're spoken to and answer when you're called, which kind of, if you interpret that as like, unless somebody's speaking to you or unless you're called upon, you shut up. And I went to National School of Dance like for most of my life in Guyana, and we were constantly told dances are seen and not heard. Dances are seen and not heard. And those are ways for adults to keep us in line, but at the same time, it was actually shutting our will down. And now I can look back and see how those things are like damaged me. And now I'm trying to work on those things, but and thankfully at least we're pointing those things out so we don't pass it on to the next generation. But for the young ladies here, just understand that if your parents do tell you those things, and even for the parents that are on, but also be mindful of how that is also honing your identity and honing who you are. But just to answer the question and fitting into society, I was brought up to be humble. You know, pride comes before a fall, X, Y, and Z. But at the same time, I'm learning the importance of also pointing out my accomplishments, Sarita, as you said, because it's not about being boastful, but it's actually also being like it's functionable. If you enter a room, no one knows who you are, it just kind of saves time by dominating the space because of your role, not because you want to show off. There's a difference. And also think about the women coming after you, you know, future children, if you decide to have children, but also the future Guyanese girls that are coming behind you, what type of example you want to set for them. It is okay and it's your right to demand your respect. And that is from your bosses, colleagues, parents. Obviously be respectful. But Arissa, you kind of touched on this earlier. Adults can be and leaders can be very disrespectful. Like this week, I had a moment where somebody was very disrespectful. The same person asked me if I passed the LSAT. And to be honest, I got up from my desk, went to the bathroom, and I bawled my eyes out in the bathroom. But crying is also strength. And then I got up and I went and told her exactly why she was disrespectful, respectfully. Because in that, my mother also has a saying, if you make yourself grass, cow gonna eat you. Right? So
see, I knew there was an expression in there somewhere.
Yeah. Right. I'm not anybody's grass, right? I am a piece of well done steak. All right. So don't like have people walk over you or disrespect you. It's not about being boastful. There's also obviously being too prideful, but then there's also the other extreme. Just find the balance in there.
Dr. Gregory has this comment that says crying is cathartic and it helped her get through as well. Honestly, it is. I'm a Pisces. I'm going to cry about it, but I'm going to boss up right after that. Like I'm going to cry about it. There's many situations at work where I have had no choice but to cry, right? Because you don't know, even as young, like Guyanese women, like in my household, I guess I wouldn't say that I was the quietest per se, because I didn't grow up in Guyanese schools. I didn't have that strict discipline and like I didn't have that. Both my sisters do, so they've always grown up with that mentality where like children must be seen and not heard. But oftentimes even my parents, and we've talked about this before, is that I never found myself having to feel like I need to fit in or I need to be quiet, and but it's also not like being the loudest person in the room doesn't mean that you're going to be the most heard. And it's about what you say and how you say it versus like screaming. And I feel like, I'm very honest. I have found myself in situations where I've been very loud in order to try to make a point. And I don't think that that's ever worked out for me, right? Because, and even, yes, sometimes you tell somebody very respectfully and quietly, and even them might take it into offense, but that sounds like a them problem, not a you problem, right? It's about defending who you are as a person, and no matter what the space is, may it be your house, your schooling, your workplace, even with your friends, right? It's important to keep people, I think, that in check, about the things that they say about you and what they say about other people. And I feel like that's something, a trait that I'm still learning and struggling with too. Because sometimes you might think that you know everything, and then you find yourselves making those microaggressions and those judgments and those conversations to other people. And then you're like, am I a bad person? Like, no, we're all still growing and we're all still learning. So even if you're not fully at that stage, or no one's ever going to be at 100%. If you're at 100%, then someone gets a trophy at the end of the day for those things. But I think that it's important that you hold yourself accountable, and you also hold the people around you accountable for saying things. So if I was Vania's coworker and I heard somebody saying something about disrespectful about her, status or whatnot, I more than likely wouldn't turn to that other person. I would turn to Vania and say, "Oh, Vania, congratulations on, taking this test that I'm probably sure it's not the LSAT because you're way past that level," right? And say, what's next for you? You're always so accomplished, and you're always such a hard worker. I wish that I possessed those skills too, just to show that person. And I think that that's where allyship and solidarity comes in between other brown people in the workplace, because oftentimes I find myself having to be in situations where I'm like scrambling to look for people who look like me in order to help me feel like I'm in a place that I, can feel safe and can express the way that I feel without being told that I'm aggressive or have to watch my tongue.
I don't feel like I have much to add. When it comes to like a societal level, there are a lot of things that you see, like representation that isn't meant for you. So it's not just a lack of representation. I'm sorry, people are talking in the background. It's not just like a lack of representation. It's the fact that this representation isn't palatable for women of color. Like the characteristics of the specific person that's being represented, it's not for me. It's not for people who look like me and people who are like me. And so what needs to be done is creating an entirely new representation just for people that go through the same things that you and I do. I feel like that might make a little bit more sense.
Okay, I have a second question. Are there any cultural beliefs or traditions that you do not agree with or reject?
Growing up, I grew up in Belize, and I struggled a lot with my self-identity because one, didn't see a single person that looked like me. I grew up my whole entire life being told that I was Dougla, never mind that no one in my family on either side of my family are Black. And I have always found it very interesting that my hair and my nose and how I was told my whole entire life, "Oh yeah, like you look Dougla, you look Dougla." And as I grew up, I was like, is that a bad thing? Why do you guys always say it like that? Because we all know that there's a huge difference in the way that Indo-Caribbeans and Afro-Caribbeans, especially in Guyana, speak about one another. And I think that oftentimes we hear the generation before us, maybe our parents, grandparents, aunts, uncle, speak about other people in ways that are very damaging to yourself, who probably has friends who are Black, friends who are, just different. And then oftentimes you're even told, like, do you hang out with your own country people in order to understand who you are as a person, or do you hang out with different people in order to understand how they grew up in life? My best friend is Black Guyanese, and there's so many things that are very similar, but her journey, even in America, is a journey that and judgment and stereotypes that I have never faced. And so she not only has to struggle with her self-identity as a woman of color and being Guyanese, but also being, as Vania, you've expressed before, being African American in America, and you're and a woman on top of that. So you're getting like a triple edged sword here, where you're being told that. And Vania, you sent me a little message, which I actually feel is very interesting. I would like to talk about it for a second, because I do come across looking more Indian, but I don't have any ties to the country, because even Indians here in America don't treat Guyanese people, or your ancestors, you know, our ancestors, especially Indo-Caribbean women, my ancestors are from India. I trace my lineage, I know they're from India. And yet for some reason, I will never be Indian enough. I'm not Black, so I don't resonate with the culture in that sense. Never mind, all of my best friends are Black, and the people I admire and look up to and my mentors are Black women. And where I work, I profit off of Black culture at my job. You know, we profit and capitalize off of Black stories, and hopefully, because I'm in a position of power, to capitalize off of them, and not necessarily capitalize, but to tell these stories from people, from Black people themselves, versus using the word capitalize, because we all know that most of pop culture and from many brands now stem and benefit off of Black culture that's created both on TikTok, on Instagram, and just on social media in general. And I find it very interesting, and I never have been able to fit in with Indian people here in America because I never felt Indian enough. And I've always just circled back all the way to the first question about self-identity. You sort of just don't know what your identity is. You know, you sort of don't know where you fit in anymore because you don't have the same struggles of other people, but you have your own struggles. So that's where self-identity comes in, as self-identity. This is what your struggle is and who you are as a person. Because at no point in my life did I ever want to say, well, some people call me Douglas, so I'm going to assume there's at least one Black person in my family, so I'm going to take on what isn't meant for me. Because the chances of my best friend getting pulled over and judged and stereotyped and potentially harmed would be less than mine. So that's the reason why allyship and speaking up for other people and using your power and privilege where you at or in life is very important. I oftentimes find it that our Guyanese community could be doing a better job at being allies to their own people, right? And not be part of that erasure. We're not colonized anymore. We're not colonizing Guyana anymore. We're not colonizing America anymore. And I don't feel like we should be contributing to that mentality and that old mentality that we hear from our family members about other people, because we're not here to please, you know, the lighter side of the world. We're not here to do that. You know, we're not here to please those people. And I feel like having solidarity and having awareness to check your family members and hold them accountable when they say these things, that's my biggest pet peeve. And it's also an interesting lesson I had last week. I thought that when I left Queens that I was not going to experience, you know, Guyanese people, you know, who are not as, you know, I will say, and you guys already know, I'm a very honest person, because we've seen this many times on Liberty Avenue, Richmond Hill. You're gonna go get your greens, you're gonna go get your, you know, bread, you're gonna go do this, and you see someone, especially an Indo-Caribbean person who looks like myself, say the N-word and use language that I've heard, and having gone to school in Queens my whole entire life, having grown up in Queens my whole entire life in America, that was something that I always found very odd. We, as Indo-Caribbeans, are not the same as Afro-Indo-Caribbeans whose lineage are African slaves who were brought to Guyana. You know, our histories are so different, and yet we share the same land and could be so unified. And even I asked my mom to this day, when she watches Guyana news on YouTube, and I said, why are our people still fighting? Why? We literally know and talk about the same thing. There are Indo-Guyanese people, Indo-Caribbean people who are probably darker than some people who have African descent in Guyana. So why are we fighting? So I feel like how if we as young people are very much aware of this narrative and these things that we see and hear around us, you know, and I bring that up because I know that we all know somebody who is definitely brown, right, who does not come from African descent, that has no right or understand the heftiness of that word and what it does to a people. And then they use it as if, well, I have a right to because I'm brown. I feel like how instead of dividing us as a people, there's ways that we could hold our people and our family members around us accountable too.
I'd say one thing that I don't agree with. There's a lot of things that I might not agree with, but I would say, and I understand that back then it wasn't really much of a choice, but I really don't like the idea of equating marriage to overall happiness in life. I feel like a lot of people should focus on themselves first, because being committed to another person is it's a different commitment than the commitment you make to yourself, and it's easier to uh, change commitments with yourself than it is with another person, like together, like coexisting. And so I believe that you should know yourself before you get to know a partnership. Does that make sense? I've never agreed with that. I just don't. I'm not gonna judge you if you have gotten married young, because I know that everyone is different. I just don't believe that that's what should be fed to young people, especially young women. I just I don't know. It gives me the heebie-jeebies.
It's so interesting that I listed kind of three things, and they're kind of connected. So my first one, similar to Arissa, was submission to any type of man. As a woman, my purpose is more dynamic than staying in a marriage, regardless of the situation. And the reason why that came to my mind with this question is because a lot of women in my family I've seen just stay in relationships or stay in marriages and like, well, you know, we had we're married, so I have to stay. I made a commitment unto God, or because of whatever the case may be, like I have to stay. The children, X, Y, and Z. And as much as we all have our own decisions to make for our own lives, I think heeding Arissa's advice is really important, because before we enter a relationship, I'm not married, so I don't know. The persons who are on the call that are married could probably speak more to this, but based on my observation, marriage or getting married does not solve the problem. It's not a cure-all. Like life goes on, and the same issues you had before the wedding day, you're gonna have after it if you don't address it. The second thing I wanted to talk about was, and I know this is a touchy topic, but is again just my observation. Blood does not equal family. As a person who was ostracized by family members who were living here long before I ever came here, a lot of them were born here. My nuclear family and I were the last to migrate to the US. And we have been familied by people who were not blood, people who weren't even Guyanese, a lot more than my blood family. And I'm not saying that to say forget about your family members or forget about your blood, but don't feel like something is wrong with you if you don't feel connected to your blood family the way you might feel connected to certain friends, because there is abuse in relationships, in blood relationships, as much as there are abuse in other relationships. And a lot of times we just say things, well, they messed up my credit, but it's blood. They did X, Y, and Z to my child, but it's blood. And in choosing ourselves and accepting who we are, accepting that a blood relationship is not healthy for ourselves is also okay and also right. And then Sarita, just to kind of connect with what you were saying, and it's really a touchy topic. You talk about the race relationships, especially between Black and Indo-Guyanese. It's still an emotional issue for me. And I talked earlier about being, explaining like how I'm Guyanese and blah, 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 and whether or not I'm African-American or whatever, Black. One of the things I did change migration to US is saying that I am Black. But before I would always say that I'm mixed, because I come from I look Black, so that's why I say it, because it just stops all the questions, right? But I could trace my family members to at least to five of the 6 peoples of Guyana. My great-great-grandmother, Amerindian, my great-great-grandfather, Chinese. I have a lot of East Indian family members. You see my great-grandmother, she definitely has white in her, etc. But I have also experienced visiting an Indian family member whose wife was extremely racist, and we were never invited into the house. We were only entertained at the front step because she didn't want any N-words in her house. And this was in Guyana. And so dealing with that pain and things like that. And it's not just from the Indian Guyanese. I've heard things and I've seen things from Black Guyanese as well. And so I have made the choice to change my mindset when it comes to race relationships between myself and my East Indian friends from Guyana, or even friends from India. I have friends from both places that are Indian. And it's not just about saying, well, I'm not racist, but it's also doing away with the stereotypes. And we all know them. Doing away with the slang words that are just funny, but we know their racist connotations. But being intentional about not using those terms or not accepting those stereotypes as true. And I'm talking about like in the Guyanese cultural sense. And I'm pretty sure you all know what I'm talking about, right? Like that term that is, oh, well, we kind of use it for when people are dumb, but it's just a joke. It's not a joke. Stop using it. Yeah. So, and I call my parents and my grandparents out if I hear them using it. Yeah.
Hold your family members accountable. 1,000%.
Yeah.
Hold them accountable. Because even as you're saying this, Vania, I'm like, wait, like I'm getting so heated because it's like, it's something that we don't talk about enough, that we see it and we hear it all the time. And I'm so sorry that even in your own home country, that people would treat you in such a way when your people also built the country, when so many of Amerindians, Indian indentured servants, Africans, our people, especially the ones who live here, need to pick up a book and read more about how Guyana was created. Because there is no way, I remember, I have never been to Guyana in the past 25 years. I have not been to Guyana. And maybe one day I'll get a chance to go back. But I even subconsciously, I said, I don't want to go to Guyana when I feel like I have a lot of body weight on me. Because I know that I'm going to be judged more about my body weight, more than anything, when I'm so successful in my own right. And I think that how oftentimes I see this happen so often, that people just sit there and let their family members do that. If family is so important, if blood is so thick, so much thicker than water, then why are you saying all these so... my sister said this word to me just because she's also very invested in this conversation. She said, it's an inherited bias that runs generations deep. And I don't understand why we need to carry, and I don't think anybody here would carry that on. But I remember in middle school seeing all of the other Guyanese kids chime in when it was time for, if young Black African American kids are using the word that they are choosing to use instead of based in trauma, but based in terms of endearment, and we hear it in rap music and pop culture and so much more, that doesn't mean that you need to be saying it. I also still get thoroughly offended, and that's the reason why, you know what, I'm glad that when people say that how, oh, you're from Ghana, instead of saying that you're from Guyana, because then they won't have to bring up the calling me a coolie, which I still find is very offended. It's such an offensive word, because it's not anything based in the celebration of our culture and our people. It was what our, colonizers called our ancestors, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, great-grandfathers. I just think that we need to move past this generation that is so blind to what happened to our people as a history. Stop being racist towards the people who have also been a part of their family and the people who built our country, right? And not understand that we need to celebrate these people more. And even part of how I'm doing that is at work, I advocated for us to celebrate Caribbean American Heritage Month. There's so many VH1 cast members who are Indo-Caribbean that are from Trinidad, they're from Jamaica. There's so much more. And I even did a takeover with Spice, the iconic dancehall queen Spice, and Carly Red, who's from Trinidad. You know, who these two cast members are. Both these women are very strong advocates to like let everybody know who and what they are like in their culture and how to celebrate and bring that, because there's so many more, you know, Caribbean people within the culture that people don't realize or make that correlation. And it was something I was so proud of this month, in addition to Pride Month campaigns, the Black Music Month campaigns. But this is something that I said, I am the only Indo-Caribbean woman in this team. I have the power to tell our audience, right, more about our culture. If our talent is doing it on our TV shows, then we should be amplifying it more too, right? And that's one small way that I use my power this month to amplify, you know, our people. Because while I may not have that tie to Guyana anymore, I still find it very important that this is who I am, my identity. When my children ask me where I'm from, where their grandparents are from, where their grandparents are from, I don't want that to be embedded into bias and racism and not realizing how much of a beautifully mixed and diverse place that Guyana is, and moving forward as a people versus holding us back.
My final question is, did you ever question yourself about your career path because of being a colored girl?
I'm going to say, I said this in the last time I spoke to you ladies, absolutely not, right? Because what your parents want you to do, right, and what you want to do are two separate things, especially when it comes to your career. I've said this once, I'll say it again. My parents did not think that I would be making that much money when I was in high school chasing down celebrities. And now I make over 6 figures, and I do that and do that very well, right? Don't let them make you think that your only job in this life is to have pick me. Sorry, if you do, that's fine. If it happened at a young age, that's fine too. But at the end of the day, your obligation to society is not to just do that. And I remember, Arissa, you mentioned this earlier, you know, about feeling like your obligation is to get married. I've always wanted to get married and have children. But the thing is that how I know that how I can raise my children, know that I was so successful and dedicated so much time to my career, right? And not that being on the basis of a man, may that be my father or any other significant others, right? That's based on my success and my success alone, right? No brother. I believe my mom always says that how she never had sons. But the thing is how I couldn't understand where that difficulty comes from and that mindset, because we all know how different men are treated in our culture in being upheld for doing the basics, not even the basics sometimes, just below the basics. And they get praised for doing the bare minimum, right? And we as women work so hard to try to prove to them that we are not these wayward type of crass women who step out of line and whatnot. We're not in the 1500s or the 1950s anymore. I'm sure it's not happening in the 1500s, but you know, like, we're not in that time anymore. We're allowed to have jobs, choose our careers before having children or getting married, right? And still be good daughters and still be there, you know? I think that we need to move past this. And I wish for all Indo-Caribbean parents to move past this. Your daughters are going to still be good daughters, even if they choose a career before a husband and children. Because at the end of the day, do you want them to be the shy, quiet, put in a hole and corner wall type of women, when I know that our women are not like that, and they're not supposed to be like that? They can be great educators, lawyers, doctors, you know, people who are beyond just, you know, the basics, but can do and be amplified so much more. I think that there's so much more that our women can do, and I think that how our family dynamics just need to be better in letting them know that you can be whatever you want to be. Don't let them think that where you're going, there's no money in it, because the thing is that you're not a doctor or a lawyer. I know I'm not a doctor by any means necessary. or can't do anything regarding law, but I damn as well know that I can do my job, and I can do my job well, and actually provide and have a very successful career. And it's not the path, because myself, and I only know one other girl in this industry, and her name is Sabrina Mohan, and she's a daughter of one of the board members in this organization, and that's how we got connected to this. And she and I had that conversation that we want to see more of each other in this industry.
I don't think that I considered jobs based on, or considered a career path based on being a woman of color. I think that I always was like, I could go into whatever I want. I did consider how people were going to treat me, but it wasn't like I wasn't going to accept something just because of how people were treating me. Like, I've been in situations where I was in things that weren't considered for Black people. I was still there. I don't think that it really mattered to me, because I know that I'm fine with however many obstacles you throw at me. I'm still going to do what I want.
Yeah, I don't know if so I'm kind of different. Up until law school, no, I never questioned my path, and no, I never questioned like where I was supposed to be. Like, since the age of like 8, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, because for some reason, even in primary school, when everybody else was afraid to talk or tell the teacher that they wrote the wrong number on the board, I would just be, excuse me, miss, you wrote, and I had no problem with being, no problem being wrong. So I was very comfortable with speaking up for myself, and even speaking up for other people that were afraid to talk. But when I hit law school, man, I wanted to find the nearest exit. It was definitely difficult, and I was placed in so many situations that made me question whether or not I should be there. So to be honest, maybe half of the time I was there just to save face, because I can't just like quit. Now I'm like the only Black woman in my year. Now I'm gonna leave. Like, that's gonna look horrible, right? Because they expect me to fail. I'm the only Black woman in my year, one of 3 Black people out of 150 something students. Over 60% of the class had immediate family members that were attorneys and or judges, or in the legal field of some sort. I did not feel like I belonged. And it is also okay to feel like that. But at some point you need to pause, pull yourself back, and first of all, know your why. Because I personally don't think you should be entering any career if you are not sure that that's your calling or your purpose. Because quite frankly, you're not going to succeed. Pull back and know your why, and just hold on to that like it's your lifeline, because it really is. And that's where you find your confidence. That's where I found my confidence. So I always knew I wanted to be in the legal space. I toyed with the idea of criminal law for a while, but my mother was like, don't do that, because people end up dead. Attorneys end up dead all the time. Defendants come out of jail, they come hunting for you, and things will happen. But I'm at the point where I am being more open to embracing it and understanding that I have a calling to serve people. And that's most likely going to come at some point in me being a prosecutor. And I am embracing that, because there's only 2% Black women in the legal field, and man is way smaller than that when you look at the prosecutorial branch in every single state. And I'm at the point where I can say, if that leads to me dying, once I know that the days I spent doing it, I was living in my purpose, like, I'm fine with that. So for the most part, no, I never questioned. I did go through a period of question, and that's okay. But coming back around to my why and understanding and embracing my purpose is what made me continue in it.
I'm here for all of this, ladies. We are overtime, but you were on fire. Okay. women on fire, girls on fire. You guys are on fire today. I want to just thank you for such a dynamic conversation, really getting to a lot of the identity and acceptance issues that occur across a variety of communities of color. And sharing your own experiences and letting us know how we can navigate it, as many of these teens on the call want to know, because they're aspiring to be where you are. So we want to just thank you so much for coming and being here and being a part of the panel, and for you to continue to spin your brown and black girl magic.